Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the OECD webinar on the implications of low-carbon hydrogen production on renewable energy systems. So today's meeting will be organized as follows. We'll have a short welcome to the audience, followed by a keynote speech and 2 sessions. So overall, the event will last 2.5 hours. I would be very grateful if all participants can rename themselves on Zoom to indicate their organization name on top of their first and last name, and remain muted until we open the floor for Q&A after the speakers' interventions. So that being said, thanks again for joining, and I leave the floor to Kumi Kitamori, who is Deputy Director in the Environment Directorate of the OECD.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're connecting from. Welcome to our webinar series on clean hydrogen development in emerging and developing economies. So this is a new series being held under the OECD's Clean Energy Finance and Mobilization Program, or what we call CEFIM. The first webinar in January reflected the importance of certifying the origin of electricity used for hydrogen production, for it to be clean or low carbon, and thus the environmental sustainability. For our second webinar today, we aim to discuss the interplay between renewable energy and the low carbon hydrogen markets. Now, I believe it is very clear for all participants in today's webinar that low carbon hydrogen and products derived from it will play a key role in achieving low carbon and net zero emissions going forward. Back in November 2022, in the margins of COP27, the OECD released a paper on green hydrogen opportunities for emerging and developing economies under our CEFIM program. Now, that paper was part of the OECD work to assess the effectiveness of policy and financing instruments to improve low carbon hydrogen projects' business models across the whole value chain. Now, global net zero scenarios foresee a total hydrogen production of up to 600 million metric tons annually by 2050. 2/3 of this volume could be produced using renewable power, but that would require about 8,000 gigawatts of additional renewable electricity generation capacity to supply nearly 20,000 terawatt hour per year. Now, that is a massive challenge, considering that the global electricity consumption for all users as of today is close to 30,000 terawatt hour per year. Now, so therefore, it is necessary to optimize the synergies offered by hydrogen production and renewable electricity development. For instance, hydrogen can provide a storage solution for renewable electricity, and in reverse can be used to produce electricity. At the same time, low carbon hydrogen production should not divert renewable energy resources that are needed for meeting basic social and economic development needs. This underlines the importance of investing in additional renewable power capacity. Depending on the local conditions, low carbon hydrogen can be produced from dedicated renewable electricity capacity, grid power, or a combination of both. In this context, we have set 2 objectives for today's webinar. First, to gain insights into the opportunities and challenges of renewable energy integration into hydrogen production. And second, to understand the policy needs to create and grow green hydrogen markets. We have designed the second webinar today as a regional peer learning exercise for our CEFIM countries. So we have several countries participating in our Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization Program, CEFIM. And these countries come from South Asia and also Southeast Asia. Rapid developments are taking place in low carbon hydrogen markets in these regions, such as the recent release of the National Green Hydrogen Mission of India, or the identification of hydrogen as a key technology in Indonesia's energy sector roadmap to net zero emissions. I hope that today's exchange will facilitate country best practices and country exchanges to be, domestic country experiences to be exchanged between countries of these regions, as well as OECD countries. And we hope that this can foster the uptake of low carbon hydrogen markets. And we have, I just want to note also that we have very good collaboration with our colleagues at International Energy Agency, IEA, in this work, but many other OECD work streams. And today we are very happy to have Ika Hanula. He is a senior energy analyst at the IEA to set the scene for the webinar today. And we would also like to thank all the distinguished speakers from governments, the private sector, including sectoral associations and international organizations. I also invite all participants in webinar today, not just to listen in, but also to contribute to the discussion actively. As Joseph said, there will be Q&A after a series of presentations. And we will be making the recording of the webinar today available on our website, along with all the presentations and summary notes. So now let me hand over to Ika from IEA for his keynote presentation. And I wish you all a very productive discussion today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Fumi, very much for the introduction, and good morning from Paris to all participants on my behalf as well. So I was really happy to have this opportunity to share some perspectives on hydrogen from the IEA. And I hope that kind of the things that I will be discussing in my presentation will then help and feed into the good discussion you are about to have on hydrogen today. So I just want to start with the kind of the context for this. This is a figure from our latest edition of the World Energy Outlook, published November last year. So where we show that we see that despite all the kind of situation and high prices and global energy crisis environment we are living today, we still see that peak fossil fuel demand is coming this decade. So now, for the first time in all our scenarios, we see that the fossil fuels will peak this decade. This peak is led by a permanent decline in coal, peak in oil later, and natural gas will plateau. This is our stated policy scenario, so our baseline scenario. And in our more stringent climate scenarios, the peak will be even more pronounced. But this will be a historic moment this decade, since the Industrial Revolution. Every decade has used, for the last 150 years, more fossil energy than the previous decade. But this will now turn and peak during this decade. So a big momental shift is about to happen. If, of course, peaking fossil fuel use is not the enough, then to meet our ambitious climate goals, after peaking, the emissions need to be turned into a permanent and steep decline. Here I have, for context, the evolution of emissions by sector from our net zero emissions 2050 scenario. This is a scenario that is consistent with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees of Celsius. So from a net zero scenario point of view, this is like a typical evolution on the left-hand side, because every sector needs to contribute. So if we have anything else than net zero, less stringent emission targets, then maybe only electricity sector and transport can contribute. But if you are really looking for a net zero energy system, all traditional energy sectors, electricity, industry, transport, and buildings need to contribute. And this is, I think, especially the context why hydrogen is so interesting today, because it can be used to decarbonize the so-called hard-to-abate sectors like long duration transport and industrial uses. On the right-hand side, we see the second hallmark of a net zero scenario, which is that there will always be some residual emissions coming from agriculture, for instance, that then need to be offset with a equivalent amount of negative emissions, so carbon dioxide removals. Here, what is also typical is that the power sector leads the emission reductions to 2030. And this is especially important because much of the decarbonization of other sectors is based on electrification. So it's really important that we drive very quickly the power sector emissions down so that when we electrify energy end uses, that will then supply from low emission electricity. Electricity and energy efficiency really play the big role in a net zero scenario, but so do fuels, and especially low emission fuels. So they are critical for reaching net zero, and we cannot achieve net zero simply by decarbonizing our electricity generation. So here we can see the evolution of the amount of low emission fuels that are needed in the net zero emission scenario. So they become the second biggest source of energy, second to electricity by 2050. Hydrogen as a part is when produced from fossil fuels with CCUS or from via electrolysis using renewable electricity is a low emission fuel. And there is a lot of hopes for hydrogen to decarbonize important activities, but it's still only one piece of the puzzle. So in the end, there will be a toolbox of measures how to achieve these emission reductions. And if we look at where the cumulative CO2 reductions come by 2050 by mitigation measure, we notice that renewables will carry on the largest load by avoiding 35% of the cumulative emissions, and electrification will take 19%. Hydrogen shares in cumulative CO2 reductions is around 6%. So, but this is all the more significant because with hydrogen it happens in energy end uses that would be very difficult to reduce without hydrogen or hydrogen derivatives. So if we now look a little bit more closely on hydrogen itself, this is how the evolution of hydrogen production in the net zero scenario. So we see that hydrogen production jumps sixfold by 2050. So hydrogen is a big business already today. Around 95 million tons of hydrogen is produced purposely on an annual basis, but this needs to grow to a level of 500 million tons. And this is mostly driven by water electrolysis and natural gas with CCUS. Looking on the end use size and the share of hydrogen fuels by sector, we notice that hydrogen and its derivatives, so hydrogen can be then further post-processed and converted to ammonia and synthetic fuels. And hydrogen as a feedstock contributes mostly in the chemical sector and in the future also in the iron and steel sector, and then in long haul road transport. In aviation, hydrogen is converted to synthetic fuel, so-called sustainable aviation fuel or synthetic kerosene, and then in shipping, for coastal vessels, hydrogen will contribute as itself, but for long distance maritime transport in the form of ammonia. So this is kind of the general big picture of how hydrogen contributes in an IEA net zero emission scenario. We, in our renewable energy market report, we have now started to track also the amount of renewables that are associated with hydrogen projects. And we really see that cheap solar PV and wind are driving green hydrogen project development. So during the next 5 years, we forecast that hydrogen production, renewable capacity that is dedicated to hydrogen production will grow 100-fold by 50 gigawatts during the next 5 years. And there is a geographically diversified pipeline of projects across all continents. So when we look at a map that we have based on our analysis, which gives location-specific production cost estimates for hydrogen, renewable hydrogen in 2030. We see that it is quite dispersed. But there are key locations globally in Chile, North Africa, in Arabian Peninsula, India, and Australia, especially, that are kind of these kind of hotspots for electrolytic hydrogen or renewable hydrogen production. And maybe besides India, these locations are also quite remote from the main demand centers for hydrogen, which means that the hydrogen would need to be transported somehow. But like I will be discussing in the next slide, you'll notice that hydrogen transport, if it's not done through pipelines, actually can add a lot to the cost of hydrogen. And maybe the main point here is that even though you can have quite cheap hydrogen in locations, we think that in the best locations, by 2030, you are able to produce renewable low-emission hydrogen at the cost of about $1.5 per kilo. But this doesn't mean that hydrogen will become available globally at that price everywhere, because hydrogen is quite expensive to transport, and then you can have quite different prices depending on location. So here is an example of a production cost. Ammonia will be more expensive always to produce than hydrogen, because hydrogen is a feedstock for ammonia production. We need to invest in more equipment, and there are losses in hydrogen conversion to ammonia. So hydrogen is, in energy terms, a more expensive fuel or a feedstock than hydrogen. But when you consider maritime transport and liquefaction cost of hydrogen, and then adding the transport cost by sea, we notice that ammonia is more cheaper to weigh as a hydrogen carrier to transport hydrogen over long distances. On the left-hand side, when if it's possible to transport hydrogen by pipeline, then it will be an easier than converting it first to ammonia and then transport ammonia by pipeline. But in marine transport, the situation is different, and ammonia is a more cost-competitive way to transport hydrogen. And because of this reason that hydrogen prices are quite diverse and differ from region to region, there is first steps for international hydrogen trade have been taken. Different methods are being developed. So-called liquid organic hydrogen carriers is one option to carry hydrogen. And the first shipment of liquid organic hydrogen carriers were carried out from Pune to Japan in 2020. And then first shipment of blue ammonia, so ammonia produced from fossil fuels, which is the US, was sent from Saudi Arabia to Japan, also to 2020. And then and in 2022, we saw the first shipment of liquefied hydrogen from Australia to Japan. And Japan is very active here in thinking about exporting hydrogen from a number of locations and developing new end uses for hydrogen. And on the heels of this trade, there is a quite sizable pipeline of projects, or hydrogen projects globally now, that are planning to export the hydrogen to these large import regions. Mostly the import demand is coming from the EU, Japan, and Korea by 2030 at this moment. So these significant hydrogen exports are planned in every major region of the world today. And the preferred method for production in these projects is actually electrolytic hydrogen. Electrolytic hydrogen covers 88% of the planned export volumes by 2030. And indeed, most of these projects target ammonia as the carrier of hydrogen by 2030. However, even if there is a 20 million tons of exports, and maybe to put that in context, the global production of hydrogen today is 95 million tons. So it's roughly 40% would represent from today's production, this export pipeline. However, when we look at the kind of demand side of it, very small amount of these projects still have an off-taker. So only about 2 million tons of the projects have some kind of an off-take arrangement at this moment. And a large bulk of these projects, that supply projects, currently have no off-take plan. Then I want to say something also about the role of hydrogen in integrating variable renewables, wind and solar, to an energy system. The IEA has defined or classified different phases in renewables integration. Starting from phase 1, phase 2, these are phases where you have only starting to integrate solar and wind to your energy system, and there's no noticeable impact at system level. But on the phase 3, the generation from wind and solar starts to determine the operation pattern of the system. And a number of countries are already in this phase 3, and some countries are already at phase 4. This is a phase where kind of the system has periods during the year where wind and solar makes up almost all the generation. And then when the penetration of wind and solar grows even further, it's going to be the systems will be reaching phase 5 and 6, where they need to cope with longer and longer periods of surplus and deficit of energy. And eventually there is a need for seasonal storage and use of low emission fuels. So hydrogen can play a role also in integrating more renewables to the grid, especially on these higher phases, which is not the case today. Most countries are in, many countries in phase 3, some countries now in phase 4. But let's say next decade and the 2040s, most regions will need to be coped with a large penetration of renewables in the grid, driven by just the cost of low cost of renewables, and then hydrogen would be helping an ammonia to be a fuel, low emission fuel to dispatch this, to provide dispatchable balancing capacity for this system. But all of these systems require some low emission fuels, and we have begun a study on this topic we published 2 years ago on the role of low emission fuels in power sector and clean energy transition. Happy to share it with you if you are interested. And then I want to finish off by saying that all of this, all the end uses of hydrogen, the trade, the ammonia part, will require major expansion of supply infrastructure. So even if we look at only the power sector, and let's say we would be using ammonia as a low emission fuel, we would be co-firing it in a coal power plant, having a 20% share of ammonia. Let's take a 10 gigawatt coal fleet, and then we will be co-firing 20% of ammonia. If we only use it for peak load as a flexibility, we will need about 1 million tons of ammonia. If we use it for base load generation, we need about 5 million tons of ammonia. Going up to 60% of co-firing in base load operation, we would need 16 million tons of ammonia annually, just for the 10 gigawatt coal fleet. And when we compare it to current global ammonia trade, which is 20 million tons per year, we understand that there is significant need to expand the associated supply infrastructure related to hydrogen and ammonia to support this emerging trade. And I think I've reached my time limit here, and I hope this was useful for giving me the discussion that we have today. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Ilkka, for this keynote speech. So thanks to your scene setting, we learned what were the opportunities, seeing as well how renewable energy can help reduce the cost of hydrogen production, but also how hydrogen can help integrating variable renewable electricity in the power system and provide co-firing options to decarbonize the thermal fleet. So we'll now move to the session 1, which will cover some opportunities and challenges of the development of renewable energy and hydrogen in South and Southeast Asia. We'll have 4 speakers presenting. The last presentation will be a pre-recorded video. So the first speaker will be Pa Herman Darnel Ibrahim, who's a member of the National Energy Council of Indonesia. We'll then have a presentation by Pham Duy Hong from the think tank Vietnam Initiative for Energy Transition, or VIET. Dia Karsiwulan from the company HDF Energy will present a range of projects that the company has undertaken in the region. And the video recorded by Fiona Simon will expose as well the opportunities and projects in Australia. So I will let now Pa Herman Darnel Ibrahim go to his presentation. Pa Herman, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon for those from the East, yeah, from Asia, maybe from Vietnam, Australia. Good afternoon. My name is Herman Darnel Ibrahim. I'm board member of National Energy Council of Indonesia. My background of education and experience is in power, so I'm not the expert of hydrogen. But my role in the Energy Council is the reshaping and renewal of the energy policy, and this includes the hydrogen as one of the energy options. So this is the status of hydrogen development in Indonesia. Indonesia still in the research and pilot project stage. Yeah? We haven't had any hydrogen plant, neither storage and also the users. We had cooperation for the development of green hydrogen, Pertamina and GIZ of Germany, and also Research Institute of Indonesia, BRIN, and Toshiba of Japan. And the future steps, the issuance of supporting regulation for hydrogen development, technical standard and incentives. We see the renewable energy source for low carbon hydrogen in Indonesia. We see some prospect from the solar energy in East Nusa Tenggara, especially from Sumba Island. Yeah, they have huge potential of the solar energy, and also from hydro energy in North Kalimantan and also in Papua. And also from geothermal energy in Sumatra and maybe in North Maluku. And the consideration for the use of the hydrogen in our energy projection, that hydrogen among new type of energy or energy carrier, this will help also creating demand for electricity. We have some oversupply maybe until until next 3 years, and creating new market for the untapped renewable energy, especially for a kind of renewable energy hydropower in Kalimantan and in Papua, to reduce fossil fuel usage in transportation. Yeah, and hydrogen can be the solution for off-grid energy storage system, and also as the source of the energy for power plant. So this is some of the development. Yeah. I think I will not go into detail, but we have some MOU, only MOU, and this between research center, now BRIN, yeah, and also with KOICA for fuel cell, this with university in Surabaya, ITS, and also some fuel cells backup based used for telecommunication. And the development of hydrogen fuel trains, this cooperation between Alstom and train factory. Train KAI is a train manufacturer in Indonesia. I cannot move the slide up. Why? I don't know. Okay. This is scenario of hydrogen consumption. So we for the to renew our energy policy, we reshaping the projection of consumption. So the final consumption, this is on the bottom line. And out of that, so far with our modeling, we projected to have the hydrogen totally by 2060, 28 equivalent to 29 million ton of oil equivalent. I think about 9 million ton of hydrogen, 9 million ton of hydrogen. And we start by 2035 with 3.8. So this may be around 1.3 million ton of hydrogen. I have the issue how to move. Okay, this is a scenario of green hydrogen utilization, and green hydrogen will be used as a fuel in passenger vehicles. That's our idea in the new energy projection, and also for heavy vehicles, ships, and also trucks, and power plants, and also as energy storage. In 2030, green hydrogen demand in industrial sector is estimated to be around 200 to 300 kiloton, kiloton of hydrogen per year. If added with demand in transportation and power generation sector, then it could be reach 400 kiloton per year. Currently, the use of hydrogen for power generation is relatively more expensive. That's the consideration of the power utility when compared to the existing coal-fired and natural gas power plants. This is a potential project for green hydrogen in Indonesia. FFI, through its representative PT IFI, plans to build a green hydrogen industry along with transportation and distribution infrastructure in North Kalimantan. North Kalimantan province will utilize the energy source from hydropower plants. The hydropower plants is already on the pipelines now. And a new domestic market that use green hydrogen will be created. Funding for the project from initial assessment, construction to operation will be borne by FFI. This is what we quoted from Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. And then green hydrogen development initiative of hybrid solar PV wind power plant on Sumba Island by PT HDF with energy of 7 to 8 megawatt daytime capacity from solar PV, 1 to 2 megawatt at night time from hydrogen storage. Use hydrogen storage for the peaker. Preliminary study results show competitive price for generation costs. So the status only the idea, still the idea. And then also Pertamina has the cooperation, as I said earlier, with Germany, then GTZ of Germany, and this estimated to provide hydrogen for the capital city of Indonesia, new capital city. I think this new capital city. And also in the we will have new capital city in Kalimantan, East Kalimantan, and this new capital city is planned to use electricity and hydrogen public transport. So electric cars and hydrogen cars, and also public transport, and also for the supply of the hydrogen and for the household and commercial. This is for the co-firing. The Power Utility of Indonesia, PLN, yeah. PLN is the Power Utility of Indonesia. Currently has 4 pilot projects for hydrogen and ammonia co-firing. So this is joint studies with partner and trials to develop hydrogen ammonia co-firing. And in medium terms, PLN is looking to run hydrogen and ammonia co-firing pilots supplied by green hydrogen and ammonia to reduce the power plant emission. So this is the 4 area in Tanjung Priok. Yeah, currently this gas fire combined cycle plant, and also in Palembang this is steam power plant fired by gas, and this is in Gresik also combined cycle gas fire plant, and also the combined cycle in Bali, Sanggaran. So this is the plan. This is the source of the of the hydrogen, and so in Priok they will use hydrogen, in South Sumatra for ammonia, in East Java also ammonia, and in Bali the hydrogen, and this is the plan. I think this is the end of my presentation, but I appreciate very much being invited to this webinar because I want to learn about hydrogen, especially to help me, to help us in formulating the new energy policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Herman. And thank you for joining. It's also very insightful for us to learn about the existing projects in Indonesia that include off-grid projects, also already some trials in the existing fleet. And it's also very interesting to see that hydropower and geothermal energy can be used in Indonesia on top of the wind and solar electricity sources that are usually the ones covered in most countries. So we will move to the next presentation by Pham Duy Hang, who's a research specialist at the Vietnam Initiative for Energy Transition. And for the next presentation, we'd be grateful if the speakers could keep it under 7 to 10 minutes so that we still have some room for the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone from Hanoi. Could you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you very much, Pham.
Actually, I am focused on the transport expert, but I have more opportunity research on the green hydrogen. On behalf of Vietnam Initiative for Energy Transition, today I would like to tell you about the green hydrogen production potential and the opportunities for Vietnam. Could you help me to move next slide? Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, we can see the following slide. Thank you.
Okay. My content is focused on the 4 parts. First, I would like to give you some overview about the policy that promotes the hydrogen production and consumption in Vietnam. And the next part, I would like to provide some overview about the hydrogen production in Vietnam. And the next part based on the some renewable resources in Vietnam, like the wind and solar energy in Vietnam. We could like to quantify how much the potential for hydrogen production and what is the opportunity for Vietnam. And the last part, I focus on some key conclusion and make some recommendation for green hydrogen production development in Vietnam. So let me focus on some current policy. And I would like to highlight that the own current policy in Vietnam is try to promote the hydrogen as a key component for decarbonizing and obtaining the net zero targets in Vietnam. The first and the top policy is Resolution 55 in 2020. And following, we have some policy to promote the renewable energy in general and promote the hydrogen production and using in general. And following in the tops, in the below, you can see Vietnam try to encourage using or adopt a green hydrogen in the industry or in the transport sector, or using the hydrogen for other strategy for green growth, and even for power development plants. We also try to we also promote using the hydrogen for reduce the CO2 emission. But in the other hand, we try to make we make some target for hydrogen production throughout the electrolyzer or CCS process, and we set the target in 2050. We can produce about the 50 million tons of hydrogen in the future. As you know now, almost the hydrogen is very potential for not only for Vietnam but for other countries. But what is the current situation in Vietnam? So let me introduce you. And in the right side, you can see the hydrogen production. Here you can see the hydrogen production in Vietnam will be produced from 4 plants. Almost they focus on the refinery and fertilizer plants, and the maximum capacity is in Nissan refinery, and the same same capacity in the fertilizer plant. And in the left side, you can see either here is the hydrogen consumption, the main user of hydrogen in Vietnam. So as you can see, also almost the fertilizer and refinery plants using the hydrogen in Vietnam, and very small amount of other sector using the hydrogen. So I would like to highlight that the production and the consumption of hydrogen in Vietnam are at the same side. In the next slide, I would like to say that the Vietnam hydrogen production in Vietnam is picking up the signal, because currently we have 3 green hydrogen production plants currently proposed by private sector, and almost the plant is focused on the south Vietnam, where is very high potential of renewable energy, especially here is the wind power and the solar power. And for other regions in Vietnam, also we have the more potential on the wind power and the solar power. As you can see in the map, we also have potential in the offshore wind and the onshore wind. And in the totally, we have more than 380 gigawatt per year could be using for produce the renewable energy from the wind power. In the same side, we also have the more potential about the solar power from rooftop or ground or floating solar. In the totally, we have about the technical potential, we have about nearly 1,000 gigawatt per year, with a large amount of renewable energy from wind and solar energy. I would like to say that Vietnam have a more potential and very high potential for green hydrogen production. And based on the amount of technical potential of green power and the solar power, I would like to using that to quantify the theoretical green hydrogen production potential in Vietnam. The first, I would like to make the definition about the theoretical green hydrogen production potential. That is the maximum value that could be produced from available green renewable energies that could be used. And we make the theory like the energy to using for producing the hydrogen could be based on the redundant technical potential of wind and the solar power with the electricity generation by renewable energy. And as you can see in this figure, we have more than 60% of technical potential of wind power could be using for green hydrogen production. And here we also have more than 80% available could be used for from solar power could be used for green hydrogen production. And based on the amount of electricity generation from power development plant trapped in Vietnam, with V minus with the technical hydrogen production, the technical power could be from solar and the wind power. We estimate that the maximum theoretical production potential in Vietnam is about 52 until 62 million tons per year for hydrogen production. And the potential is very high, but it requires large the employment and investment in the renewable energy resources. And based on that, I would like to make to see what is the opportunity from Vietnam in makes a comparison with other city and other country in the world. I would based on the selling price of power generation currently in Vietnam. And for example, here we have onshore wind farm. We have nearly 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And for others, renewable price, we could like to estimate very initial estimate like the green hydrogen price in Vietnam currently it take about 2.6 until 4% per kilogram of hydrogen. So with this amount, and I make the comparison based on the collect some hydrogen strategy in other countries like Australia, Japan, Singapore, or China. And we found that the China or Australia or Russia is a high competitor with Vietnam. So if the Vietnam want to make export the hydrogen to other countries, so maybe I found that the US or EU or Japan is the potential market for Vietnam green hydrogen export. Based on that, I would like to make the conclusion and recommendation. For conclusion, I found that the current hydrogen production and consumption in Vietnam are at the same side, and Vietnam have large green hydrogen production potential that could be account minimum 52 million tons of green hydrogen per year. But to do that, both opportunity and the challenge exist for green hydrogen development in Vietnam. To explore this potential, I would like to give some recommendation for Vietnam, like try to enhance the renewable energy developments to explore the green hydrogen production potential, and I try to implement some pilot project in the short term and try to scale up in the long term of hydrogen production, and try to develop some like smart port, green shipping or shipping building to build the supply chain in the hydrogen. And the next is try to implementing the supportive the policy like the funding for research and development on the technology, or try to provide some financial policy for infrastructure development, and try to incentive for green hydrogen export in post market in Vietnam. So last try we try to make some some policy framework like the standard for safety, the quality, or enhanced performance of hydrogen production in Vietnam is the last one for me. Thank you so much. If you have any question, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Pham. For people in the audience and participants, you're of course welcome to write the questions in the chat or to raise your hands after the next presentations to ask as well questions directly. Thanks especially for highlighting the potential that exists in Vietnam. We could see on the maps as well the huge potential, especially in the south of the country, where there is a good combination of solar, offshore wind potential, onshore wind potential. And it was also very interesting to see how the technical potential can be used for both direct electrification and green hydrogen development, subject, of course, to a huge acceleration in the renewable electricity capacity. We'll move to the next presentation by Dia Karsibulan, who's a project finance manager in HDF Energy and especially working on the South and Southeast Asia region.
Thank you, Joseph. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dia. I'm based in Jakarta, but we cover other countries as well. So about a little bit about HDF. We IPP, or we are power developer company. We're based from France. Our headquarters in Bordeaux. And we focus on the hydrogen application that includes the hydrogen grid, hydrogen to power, and also utilization of existing hydrogen. We're still new. We're just 10 years old, but we did our IPO last year to support our development in many countries. So we're present in different regions, including in Latin America, in Europe for sure, and then in Australia and also in Africa. And for the Asia market, we are starting from Indonesia to cover other countries. So in Asia, we present in different countries, including Philippines, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and we start addressing India and Japan. We started addressing Asia in 2020, so we're still quite new. But from all of these countries, we see different context, but also we see common challenges among the countries, as mentioned by IA before, that for hydrogen, the issue is always who will be the off-taker and also the transportation. For us, we try to see the hydrogen role to deliver and helping deliver the renewable energy in a stable manner and also in a consistent basis. And as the challenges, we see that in many countries in remote grid and grid edge, there are issues with the stability and also in supply of the power. And then for the small system, mainly they're not connected to the main grid or so they're usually a small system that are not interconnected, and mainly they rely on the diesel power generation. And for some area, there is an initiative for integration or introduction of renewable energy, but it's been very challenging due to the variability or the intermittency of the resources of the renewable energy itself. And yeah, as I mentioned, there is a big reliance to fossil fuel. For HDF, we focus on the two main applications. That is the RenewStable. We call it RenewStable. It's a renewable energy but stable. It's a green hydrogen to power project. And the second one is the high power. In this type of project, we utilize the existing hydrogen in a facility and we convert it to electricity using our fuel cell. And for these two main applications, we focus on delivering power to the grid or to the customer in the captive market. And as I mentioned briefly before, that for the small areas or small system or the grid edge, there are issues with the dependency to diesel power plant. And also for those areas, it will be very expensive to bring gas and coal in terms of infrastructure and also for the size of the power plant itself. While for the VRE, there is an issue because it couldn't serve as a base load and there's intermittency. And when there is a new renewable energy coming in, VRE coming into the system, the grid utility, they need to add additional load follower. And it means this is an additional investment to the grid utility. And this is something that usually not discussed when we talk about variable renewable energy. But we see also the opportunities in this context that with our type of solution, we could serve as a baseload power we have capacity factor above 80%, so it's quite similar to thermal power plant. And we handle the intermittency because we could commit to supply stable power to the grid operator or to the grid utility. So in a nutshell, our system consists of renewable energy. It could be PV, solar, or wind power. But in Asia, mainly we rely on the PV solar. And then we have the hydrogen system with the electrolyzer and also fuel cell. And then the Li-ion battery. So we don't see the Li-ion battery and hydrogen storage as a competition, but we see it as a compatible solution to deliver stable power to the grid. So during the daytime, the PV solar will supply electricity to the grid, and also at the same time run the electrolyzer, and then we will use the hydrogen, the produced hydrogen, to produce electricity using our fuel cell. And at the same time, the PV solar will charge the battery, and the battery will help to smoothing the system and also helping the transition during the daytime and nighttime. So in this profile, we could see that we deliver stable power, flat power to the grid, and we are the one who take over the intermittent series. And then we could be competitive to diesel power plant. It is not a solution to every area, but we do see so many contexts that could be suitable to our solution. And in addition to that, we could also provide grid services to the grid utility. And this is will be a discussion with the grid operator, because we could start as an island mode and we could operate under the black start mode as well. And this is to show what is the differentiation or our unique feature is that on the conventional PV solar or let's say wind power, there is an issue with the intermittency and there is high variability of the system. But with our Renew Stable, we flat out or we are the one who distribute the power, and then we could deliver or commit the same production of power to the grid operator. And in this case, you could see that the daytime operation, we could distribute it to the power that we could deliver during the nighttime or the evening time. Right now, we are developing Renew Stable type of project in many different countries. And the first one, we have the project in Siok in French Guiana. This is the multi-megawatt hydrogen to power project. We signed 25 years PPA with the EDF as a grid utility operator. And then it's the full project financing. So here we could show that hydrogen to power project could be a commercial project. And we receive financing from the commercial and also development bank. And this project is under construction and we hope to have a commission or COD by end of 2024. And in parallel, we do have a project development in many countries, including Mexico, Australia, and also in Indonesia and Philippines, which I will talk about briefly later. And the next one is the other type of solution is the high power. So in this high power project, in the basic or the simple manner is that we use the existing excess hydrogen in a facility. It could be from the chemical or from the oil and gas facility, and then we use our fuel cell to convert the hydrogen to electricity. And for our first project in Martinique Island, we signed PPA with the EDF as well for 15 years. And then this is one of the ongoing project that we have right now. And just to give an overview about the context, how it could be relevant to Asia and also how the solution could be suitable, is that I will take the example of Indonesia, as we know that Indonesia, on the west part of Indonesia, there are a lot of coal and also gas power plant, geothermal and hydro. So in terms of the energy supply and also energy production, in terms of power production cost, it could be competitive and also affordable. Well, for the Eastern Indonesia, there are many small islands and small to medium sized grids, and most of them they rely on the diesel power plant because the reason I mentioned before that it's expensive to bring coal and gas, and there is a high power production cost in this area. And for the intermittency of the renewable energy, there is hidden cost or unseen cost that is transferred or mainly bared by the utility operator. And there is a issue already with the plan to replace the diesel. And for the Indonesia, we start with Sumba as our first project. Pak Daniel from DEN mentioned about our project briefly. So for this project, the capacity is 10 megawatt during the daytime and then 1.5 megawatt during the nighttime. The daytime meanings from morning until 8 p.m. It's a 10 megawatt flat. And then after 8 p.m. to morning, the capacity is adjusted to 1.5 megawatt capacity. The reason why we have different capacities because the commercial aspect, there is a context of price in Indonesia, and also we try to approach the project as a commercial project. So we try to see the balance of the technical and also commercial that could be a bankable project. And in addition to Sumba, we have identified about 20 projects in the pipeline in Sulawesi, Maluku, Papua, and also East and West Nusa Tenggara. And for our project in Indonesia, we work with multiple development agencies, including Mentari program from the UTF-CDO, GIZ, ADB, and also USDFC. So with USDFC, we signed a grant agreement to support our project development for Sumba project and also the 20 projects in the pipeline. And we are in the close coordination as well with the MEMR and also with the PLN. And for the Philippines, we start with Mindanao because the context of the regions or the area is having similar geographical context to Indonesia and also similar challenges. And comparing to other areas in Philippines, Mindanao energy context is least developed than the other areas. So we see there is a potential for the development and also the solution of our company could serve the economic development of the region as well. And for the Philippines, we signed a memorandum of cooperation with the Mindanao municipalities and also electricity cooperatives, and then we have several engagement for the awareness building and also disseminating the hydrogen projects in the country. And for the last slide, I would like to share the lesson of experience so far we have for the last 2 years we're in Asia, that hydrogen is energy storage is a new topic, though it has a great potential to help the regions to deliver firm and stable power, but this requires continued awareness building and also coordination with the key stakeholders, mainly with the Ministry of Energy and also with the utility operator. And for Indonesia, for example, we also coordinate with the Bappenas, for example. And then most of countries in Asia has no specific regulation or roadmap on the hydrogen. We know India just launched it last year, but most of other countries, they don't have it. So by having the hydrogen roadmap of energy regulation, it could promote the development of hydrogen ecosystem in the country. And for us, our type of project could be a way for the country to develop the capacity to build a hydrogen project, because most of other projects talking about gigawatt capacity, well, we're talking about megawatt. Of course, it's nice to see the gigawatt number, but it takes years to develop those projects. And for those areas that are in the remote areas or on the edge of the grid, the existence of stable clean power could help to support the economic development for those areas that basically have geographic challenge. And then for the hydrogen itself, for the hydrogen production, of course, every country could produce hydrogen, but the question is at what cost and who will be the off-taker, and then what will be the logistic issue on this hydrogen production. And for us, we produce the hydrogen on site and also use it on site to help deliver stable and clean power. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dia, for the presentation. It's very inspiring to see that some of the first projects are coming off the ground, being financed and constructed. From the OECD perspective, it's also very interesting to see that multilateral development banks, development finance institutions have been involved in the financing of these projects to provide dispatchable power based on variable renewable energy and hydrogen. We'll now move to the last presentation of the session, which will be a pre-recorded video by Fiona Simon, who's the CEO of the Australian Hydrogen Council.
Hello, I'm Fiona Simon. I'm the CEO of the Australian Hydrogen Council, and I'm so sorry I can't be there in real time, but I'm still very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'll quickly tell you a little bit about the Australian Hydrogen Council first. So the Australian Hydrogen Council, or AHC, we're the peak body for the emerging clean and green hydrogen industry in Australia. So our objective is to grow the industry, to have clean hydrogen taking its important and key part in the energy mix. We've got just over 100 members. We continue to grow, and I've shown most of our members on this slide, and you'll see that membership is over a really diverse range of sectors. Most of our members in energy and transport, also consulting. And just to lay some context in terms of how we're thinking about things, this is a slide that there's many different versions of this overall message. I just want to be clear, the hydrogen works with and supports renewable electricity and batteries. So there are many areas of the economy which are likely to be best decarbonised through direct use of electricity or using batteries. And then hydrogen comes into its own for those harder to abate sectors, where electricity can't reasonably be used and where batteries might compromise payload, such as for heavy transport or reaching high temperatures for heating. So this slide tells that story. It's analysis from the Energy Transitions Commission from actually about 18 months ago or so, and plotting various end uses of hydrogen by the confidence that we have in hydrogen as having to have a role in decarbonisation and the readiness for us to use it. So this is a global analysis, but it is very much consistent with how we're seeing things in Australia as well. There are going to be industries that we should focus on in the first instance because we're going to need hydrogen. And at the very least, it's about decarbonising existing fertiliser use. And it's then also about these sectors that are going to be quite challenging. It's the maritime sector. It's very heavy road transport. It's sustainable aviation fuels. So thinking about hydrogen also as a feedstock to other fuels for decarbonising more broadly. And within Australia, there's those uses, but it's not just about domestic use. We are very much looking at the export side of things. Australia's export ambitions for hydrogen and its derivatives are quite significant. In the 2019 Australian Hydrogen Strategy, we collectively that Australia needed to be a top 3 exporter of hydrogen to Asian markets by 2030. And each of our states and territories, at least most of them, have really wanted to go then be the leader for Australia. And so we're seeing a bit of competitive tension and a huge amount of enthusiasm to build up export markets. And of course, it's not just about exporting hydrogen and its derivatives, including ammonia, which obviously is both a hydrogen carrier and has enormous value for fertilizers separately. There's also the prospect of things like green iron and steel, alumina, aluminium and methanol, where we're looking at each of these as also being potentials as future export markets. And this slide shows analysis that's starting to have a bit of a hearing, looking at the geopolitics of global trade, seeing that sort of change over time as the world moves away from fossil fuels. And while we know that no country is likely to give up a traditional industry, I think, easily or quickly, we can anticipate that over time, economics will favour countries with lots of low-cost renewables to do processing and manufacturing onshore and then to export a product. And this is really Australia's long-term play, where we sit right at the top of the list as the country to be able to take advantage of the opportunities in renewables and also to really represent very well shared values to other democratic nations and therefore less risk. So with that context, I'm going to talk about the scale. So this for us is the standout issue. This is what I mentioned before was our future. We haven't yet built the renewables at scale to make the hydrogen. So we still have that to embark upon. So we need to know, what are we doing? How do we get there? And how it really scales at the heart of the export picture. So of the 5 issues here, I've got land, water, storage, workforce and ports. They are all super important in how we get to scale. But actually, for the sake of thinking about today's topics, the renewables piece, I'm actually going to talk about land. So this slide is from AEMO. They're Australia's independent energy market and system operator. They're the system planner for our national electricity market, which is actually just on the eastern side of the country, and our Western Australian wholesale electricity market. And AEMO has been carrying out comprehensive modelling for some time to address Australia's energy needs for the future. And overall, we're going through a very fast and very significant transition, with our electricity market decarbonising very quickly. Coal-fired power stations are retiring faster than had been anticipated. Climate policies and now at a federal level, but also at the states, are really driving this transition. So the scenarios that AEMO has looked at in its planning for the system, they had a range, and there was one called the step change scenario, which is what we're looking at here. And this was deemed most likely of the various scenarios. We can see that we actually need to effectively double the level of renewable electricity each decade to 2050, whilst also continuing to invest in rooftop PV systems. Now, this scenario is not actually the one that's ambitious about hydrogen. There's a scenario that was called the hydrogen superpower scenario. That requires more renewables again, based on an understanding and expectation of a vibrant export market. So this is really a way, what I'm showing you right now, of understanding Australia's domestic needs for renewables before we really even addressed hydrogen. Now, I also note that AEMO is modifying its scenarios, and the head of AEMO was quoted not that long ago in the media as suggesting that their hydrogen superpower scenario was considered more likely than it had been even last year when this work was released. Now, AEMO doesn't look at the whole economy across the non-energy issues, and it doesn't address the further opportunities for Australia to do things like use hydrogen to process raw materials, such as iron ore, to process it, turn it into iron that we can then export. This piece of work that I'm showing you now does go that bit further, and it's material from a really important piece of work carried out by a group called Net Zero Australia. So they released material in August last year. This is from that piece of work, where the number of modelling scenarios that they had, but for the main one, for an electrified future for 2050, they said electricity generation is going to need to be about 40 times the capacity of the national electricity market. And much of it is driven by hydrogen export. So this is about solar and wind generation and the major construction builds to come for Australia. And it raises really important questions. So how much land are we talking about for the solar and the wind? So what you can see here is these sort of flower arrangements across the top. These are multiple huge solar arrays, and each one is the size of Tasmania, as you can see the small island at the bottom right. Now, technically the land's there, and a lot of this land is actually not highly densely inhabited. We're talking a lot of desert here. But what's not yet clear is how that would be accessed, because the land is still not free. We have First Nations with native title. There'll be some pastoral land in there. So there really still needs to be some really comprehensive understanding of how we engage with landholders and title holders. Policymakers are going to need to have a think about and trade off different values, including various land developments for renewables for different purposes. And I haven't even talked about blue hydrogen. The question then would be, well, where do we store the carbon? Where do we store the carbon dioxide in the making of our hydrogen? So you can see here that this question of renewables is a really big one for us, because we have all this opportunity. We really do have excellent solar irradiation. We have the capability to combine excellent solar irradiation with excellent wind, but we also need to actually be able to build it. And so that's really where this transition unfolds for us in these next decades. And it is likely going to be a challenge, but it's one that I think we're up to. The really important thing, though, is to understand for us to understand collectively how we work with communities. So the good news is that the Australian governments, so the federal government and our states and territories, have been addressing means of how we coordinate the enormous amount of generation build to come. So they've created renewable energy zones, REZs, and these cluster this large-scale renewable energy projects to then better consult with communities if there's multiple projects in a region, and take advantage of economies of scale. So you'll see here, this is from AEMO again. These are some of the suggested and actual renewable energy zones that are in the process of being created. And this is across that national electricity market, which, as I mentioned, is actually across the east of our country, not actually national. You'll also notice that there isn't a lot of overlap with our solar Tasmanias, which is on the one hand possibly good, because it means that there's not a need for an awful amount of coordination. Possibly those projects would be reasonably straightforward, although massive. But it could also be bad because it might indicate that separate planning is still required and maybe there isn't the existing infrastructure or resources to draw on. So with everything that's to come, the key things that I guess I would think would be important to draw out is that we still do need to build the renewables that we need to make green and renewable hydrogen at scale. There's going to need to be a way of addressing the political and local issues around how we think about that land and other competing values for its use. Even when we're actually then using the land for renewable electricity, how do we think about the use of that renewable electricity so that we're not cannibalizing or being seen to cannibalize the green electrons that could otherwise go to a different or possibly better purpose in people's eyes? Do we need to decarbonise the grid before we look at hydrogen in a certain area? And then how do we work with the communities through all of this? Because they're going to have views about how they want their land to be used as well, whether it's in favour or not of the renewables picture versus something else, or whether it's even in favour of one type of renewables activity over another. There's a lot there to do then to work with communities to talk about and have them understand the alternatives, to share the benefits, and particularly to understand local content. And so that's something which we're taking quite seriously, how to support local communities so that you're actually building the community, not taking from it. The other thing is that right now it's a bit difficult to talk about hydrogen because there's nothing to touch, to see, to feel, there's nothing to hear. And on the one hand, that's good because, if on the one hand we haven't had major risks or fears to manage. On the other hand, we need to be able to talk about something and enable people to have a genuine vision of something that we can work toward. So there's something to be said there for us managing relationships quite slowly and quite carefully. But we can, I think, address people's perceptions now, and that's something which is being addressed already. So I'll end my presentation there. There's just some thoughts about how we are looking at renewables to make hydrogen. It's still early days, but there's certainly a lot to do, and I think we're able to do it well. Thank you.
So we will now open the floor for Q&A. Given the time, I'd be grateful if the panelists can also answer to the questions in less than a minute. I will start with some questions received in the chat. So maybe first to Pa Herman. You mentioned that Indonesia plans to develop a national hydrogen strategy. So maybe a question whether the timeline or the estimated date is already known, and if it will also include the strategy to develop blue and green hydrogen, how we will take into account these different production mode of hydrogen. Thank you.
Yeah, the green strategy should be included in the national energy policy, but I don't know how far we can produce a good strategy because currently we have expert of hydrogen from our National Research Institute. So we will rely on them because in National Energy Council itself, we have no expert on hydrogen, but we will do our best to produce the strategy to develop this national strategy together with Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, because we really need that. We really need the national hydrogen strategy, because I think hydrogen will play a big role in Indonesian energy transition. Need by the utility to produce clean electricity to replace clean electricity with the base load characteristic. Yeah? We can make it through hydrogen, for instance. And also we need hydrogen to support the vehicle, the transportation, road transportation. Yeah. But why we start with the blue? Because blue is considered cheaper, maybe from gas. Yeah, from gas is cheaper and is easier. But if we found that, for instance, like in Sumba, if it is cheaper, as stated in the study, then maybe we can start directly with green hydrogen, because the important one, I think, to create the market. Yeah, if there is consumption, then there will be production. But I don't know, this like chicken and egg, but we need to have consumption to make the production. So that's why we mentioned the blue first, but this is not the fixed one, because our energy policy is still subject to discussion until we officially declare the new energy policy to replace the existing energy policy PP 79. So I have a question from Johannes. Yeah.
Yes, the question was related to CCUS indeed and blue hydrogen.
Yeah. So the strategy so far, we are not so expert in hydrogen, but so far we consider we start the demand, we start, So for instance, for the PLN groups projects, they will test with what available hydrogen. Maybe if we can use green hydrogen and its price is competitive, then they can start with the green hydrogen. If blue hydrogen is cheaper, because one of our challenge, we need to keep the electricity price affordable, and if there is increase, then will be accepted by the society, by the government, politician, and society. Yeah? So I forgot to mention the challenge. I think the challenge of the hydrogen and also all renewables in the country, this is considered to increase the production cost of electricity, and the consequences will be the need to increase the price or increase the government compensation, government subsidy on energy. But subsidizing energy is not good for the energy transition. So that's maybe the puzzle for the developing countries like in Indonesia. Actually, personally, I see for the security of the supply, we need higher energy price, and also to develop renewable, to develop hydrogen and everything. If the price of electricity is a bit higher than this time, maybe say another 50% higher than this time, then it will be conducive for the development of renewable, hydrogen, and many things. But for our country, this maybe will not be the decision of the politician. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's indeed a huge challenge, and especially in emerging economies. So the next question is for Dia, to understand as well from the moment you reach final investment decision till the moment the first molecules of hydrogen and the first megawatt hours of electricity come out. What's the usual timeline that you plan?
Right. So for us, the construction of our first project in France Guyana will take 2 years for the timeline. And for the development in Asia, we take the same approach for the first project, but for the next one will be, I think it will be like a 1.5 years for the construction. But on the timeline itself, when we talk to the government and also to the utility operators, we see the timeline, we look at the below 5 years to have our first project in Asia, and we start with Indonesia and also Philippines. And on the other hand, in Vietnam, we start not with renewable but with a high power, and we have a cooperation with Petro Vietnam on that. And then I would like to take this opportunity to respond to Bayu Wisnu Aji as well. I think you referred to some projects in Sumba that are developed through grant assistance, Pak. Both grant assistance from the government, from the MEMR, or by the development agencies. For those projects, there is an issue with the financial sustainability because the grant only cover the capex, but not on the opex. And then the second one, there's issue with the operation of the project, and that's one of the reasons why most of those projects are currently abandoned. For us, we work with our strategy is to work with the grid operator, with PLN. We will sell the electricity to PLN and have a bankable PPA as a commercial project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dia. And maybe a last question for Pham. You have highlighted the potential that exists in Vietnam, showing as well the huge potential in the south of the country. So maybe to understand if you aim to use, for instance, the curtailed power in the south of the country to produce hydrogen, or if some grid expansions are planned to avoid having too much curtailments as the renewable electricity capacity develops.
Oh, yes. Let me try to answer. Actually, for curtailments of coal power plants, actually in Vietnam, the policy we have planned. But for my case, we have some step by step to curtailment of coal power plants. But in other side, we need to enhance the green renewable energy to support and make the energy sustainable, or in order to remain the energy security in Vietnam. So we need to keep both and replace step by step.
Thank you very much, Pham. I think this is a good way to close session 1. And we will move now to a couple of polls that you will see appearing shortly on the screen. So the first poll that we're having will be kind of a summary of the session 1. And we will ask you to rate 10 challenges to overcome to develop renewable electricity and hydrogen in South and Southeast Asia, or more specifically in your country. So we'll leave you a few minutes to complete those 10 ratings. It's just an important point. So 1 means that the issue is the least important or the lower challenge, and 4 means that this is the highest challenge. So we'll leave you a few minutes and then comment on the result of the first poll. Thank you. So we will leave still 1 minute to complete, and in a minute we will comment the results of the first poll.
Okay.
So we are now showing the results of the first poll. So maybe to comment very briefly on what we see, and we will also comment that on the summary that we will release on our website after the webinar. On top of the access to low-cost renewable power and developing national roadmaps, which is often mentioned as a key enabling conditions to produce hydrogen, it's interesting to see three main aspects that are mentioned here. First, the need to build and invest in infrastructures to favor or to facilitate the development of hydrogen, especially for the integration with the power systems and to bring flexibility to the system. So also not to forget the costs associated with this part of the value chain. A second key element that is mentioned is the need to establish pipelines of projects. And I think this is also what we have been hearing, that on top of the memorandum of understandings and high-level targets, concrete projects on the ground are also key to enable the integration and to better understand the project design. And lastly, and this is very consistent with this previous comment, one of the main challenges that was highlighted specifically for the region is the difficulty to access finance and to mobilize investors. So it's also very interesting that we had a presentation of commercial project that could attract both public and private finance in this first session. We will now move to a second poll that will also be an introduction to the second session on the policy needs to create and grow hydrogen markets. So here we will ask you to select 3 policy instruments among the 10 that we have listed that are for you the most important ones to develop green hydrogen and renewable electricity in the country. So of course, we would advise that you first go through the 10 proposals and in order to select only 3 of them. Thank you. Yeah, we will leave you 1 additional minute to complete the poll and then comment on the results. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you will see the results of the poll appearing, and to comment on the results of the poll and to moderate the session too afterwards, I leave the floor to my colleague Dea Sagin, who leads the program here.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And thank you to all the participants for providing your inputs. Actually, the outcome of the second poll quite well responds to the challenges, and also it highlights the key policy solutions or the things which we are seeing on ground for successful project developments for hydrogen and its derivatives in the countries we've heard from today. Probably the most important one, as the poll results show, is the preparation of country strategies, hydrogen roadmaps, that are integrated with the broader energy and climate strategies. What we also see is the importance of fiscal incentives and other market-based instruments such as carbon pricing to ensure cost competitiveness. So that's the second most important policy that seems to be from this audience. And the third and the final one concerns solutions to create demand, to create markets, whether through auctions or other enabling conditions and business models that can show success in the hydrogen sector. So thank you very much for your inputs. We find these polls very, very helpful. It shows where the markets are going, where the policy attention is growing. And to be able to discuss that in more detail in the second and the last session of today's webinar, we'll be looking into the policy needs. And we have 4 distinguished speakers: Patrick Aquino from the Department of Energy in the Philippines, he is the Director of Energy Utilization Management Bureau. From ERIA, based in Jakarta, Indonesia, so that's the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Aloysius Joko Purwanto, he's an energy economist who will be sharing insights. From the IEF India, Shantanu Srivastava, who's an energy finance analyst, will be shedding light on the finance aspects in relation to the policy needs. And finally, from Japan, METI, Deputy Director of Hydrogen Fuel Cell Strategy Office, Andre Hiroki Yoshida, will be with us as the last speaker of today's webinar. So I'd like to give the floor to Patrick Aquino for his presentation.
Yeah, good day, everyone. I do not have a presentation on hand. What I would be sharing with you is how the Philippines is trying to craft its hydrogen policies as of the moment. As indicated in the outline, so this poll survey was very, very timely for us. As of the moment, the Philippines is creating a working group to develop our own hydrogen roadmap, which includes ammonia. We are in the early stages of that development, but we are finding ourselves in a situation wherein we are already being approached by commercially available solutions. So on the side of the Philippines, we are working double time to catch up on those developments. We take note of the cues provided in the 2 survey questions that I was able to join, that the necessary incentives should be put into place. In that regard, in the Philippine setting, we are exploring the possibility of tying hydrogen, in particular, to renewable energy. As just recently, late last year, we have relaxed our renewable energy resource service contract direction to allow for 100% foreign ownership for solar, wind, in particular, renewable energy resources. And what we're seeing in particular and envisioning for our hydrogen sector tied to renewable energy is a possible energy storage approach using hydrogen. So the necessary policies and regulations are being crafted in that direction. We are doing improvements and refinements on our distributed energy resources and energy storage issuances to accommodate the entry of hydrogen. In terms of the longer term objective, in the upcoming update of our Philippine Energy Plan due this year, we will be providing for a dedicated section on hydrogen and ammonia, recognizing its role towards our clean energy scenario and reaching our carbon aspiration, carbon neutrality, and net zero aspirations. So I will pause here for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this update from the Philippines. Very interesting. Very interesting points and developments. I will be reflecting on those later during the wrap-up. But before that, I'd like to give the floor to Aloysius Joko Purwanto from the area. I understand we have a small technical problem with respect to the slides. So I want to ask if Joko if you can present the slides yourself, please. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Yes.
Yeah, it looks good. If you can make full screen, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And yes. Good morning and good afternoon, all. So I'm Joko Purwanto. Joko. I'm from area, so Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, and we are Economic Research Institute working in partnership with the government from the 16 East Asia Summit countries. And we have also energy unit, and we do a lot of studies in the energy sector. And thank you for OECD for having invited me to this very important meeting. And I'm tasked to talk about this very difficult question, to answer this question: what kind of policy needs to create and to grow low carbon hydrogen market in ASEAN? So I would like to briefly show you the current estimate of potential of renewable energy in ASEAN, and then go directly to the possible policies. So yes. So in ASEAN, we have the three major, or the three biggest renewable energy sources with the biggest potential is in fact solar PV, and then wind power and hydropower. Of course, there is also quite important amount of bioenergy and geothermal, but this is the variable renewable energy sources are the most important one. And for solar PV, for example, in total ASEAN, it is estimated that there are potential of 3,500 gigawatt for the solar PV. And we see that this potential is not evenly distributed. Like Indonesia has the biggest potential of around nearly 1,500 gigawatt, and then the rest of the regions is Myanmar, and then Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And we know that in the last couple of years, Vietnam has been the ASEAN countries that has been able to boost this share of solar PV and wind power as well in its electricity generation, of course, with some issues that we all know. And then the wind power potential for ASEAN is about 1,500 gigawatt. And we divide into offshore and onshore, and the offshore is about 1,200 gigawatt, and the onshore is about only 300. So offshore potential for wind power is kind of 4 times bigger than the onshore. And lastly, the hydropower potential is around 280 gigawatt. And as we see that, of course, wind power potential is not is neither evenly distributed. Philippines have the biggest, and then followed by Vietnam and Indonesia, and as well as hydropower. But
we don't hear you, Joko.
Sorry, you cannot hear us?
Yeah, now we hear you. Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay, so yes, sorry, the internet connection. So I hope it will be stable. So so for example, in Indonesia, we see that internally it is not evenly distributed between Java and Sumatra. Java and Sumatra are the most densely islands, but other regions which is less dense populated has a bigger potential, not only in solar PV, but also in wind, but also in hydropower. But we'll talk about that later on. And how about the policies? So I would like to, the big question is, should renewable electricity be used directly or be transformed into hydrogen? That is the layman question, but also the expert question that are always asked in this idea of producing hydrogen. So I would like to divide the policies into two: supply and demand. So from the supply side, as the polls has also shown us, and we have voted like as the most important thing is to have to establish a national and regional hydrogen strategy and policies. This should include targets, objectives, roadmap, and then define activities and measures. And most interestingly, as the vote has shown, that it should include carbon pricing. So in fact, carbon pricing is is considered to be a powerful tool to boost or to be able to trigger production of hydrogen. But for ASEAN countries, carbon pricing is also frightening. But when we talk about the implementation of carbon pricing, for example, at regional level between countries, then we can think of scenario where countries like Singapore can buy hydrogen from countries that produce hydrogen from, let's say, from hydropower-based electricity, such as Laos, PDR, or Cambodia, or from green hydrogen production in Vietnam, due to the high level of carbon price set at the inter-country level, for example. So this will be quite a win-win situation, for example. And then the second one is to launch low carbon intensity hydrogen pilot projects, focusing on the use of surplus electricity that includes curtailment, where hydrogen can play its role also as batteries, as energy carriers. So for this purpose, for example, the government need to set the incentive and provide the incentive for the local manufacturing to start to participate in the hydrogen production in the pilot projects or demonstration projects, and then allowing also IPP, for example, to produce hydrogen from the power that they are generating. So let's say, for example, like the long-term PPP for the next PPP that will be signed, the IPP should be given also the flexibility to produce hydrogen instead of only electricity. And I would like to emphasize the importance of surplus electricity, because this can be considered as the really low-hanging fruit, not only in electricity that is produced from hydrogen, but also from the from hydropower, but also from the variable renewable sources such as solar and wind. And we need to take into account also like the geographical or spatial differences that I have shown previously, where the potential of renewable energy are not evenly distributed. For example, in the east of Indonesia, Papua Island, which has a big potential of solar as well as hydro, then but at the same time has a very low demand because it is the less densely populated region in Indonesia, for example. Then the renewable electricity produced in the region can be transformed into hydrogen and then shipped to other islands such as Java and Sumatra. And then the other consideration is where for example, geothermal power generation are very often located in a remote area. Then it can be in some cases that the production of hydrogen and then shipped to the other region that has higher demand will be much more feasible economically than to build a transmission line connecting that geothermal power plant to the end users where electricity will be consumed. And then from the demand side, how to develop demand? The first thing is to develop market potential from the current virtual network of power supply, especially in remote island or remote grids, with a focus on the use of natural gas. So in this case, for example, Indonesia, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources has a plan to switch 47 diesel-fired power plants in the islands, mostly in the eastern part of Indonesia, to use natural gas or LNG shipping. I think this kind of initiative or this kind of policy measures should be emphasized and should be promoted, not only in Indonesia, but also in other ASEAN archipelagos, such as the Philippines, for example, because natural gas provide one way of the virtual network where the receiving port or the terminals can be used later on for hydrogen, as well as that the idea of co-firing can start not in the big gas-fired power plant, but in the small or island power plants. And then at the end, finally, I would like to also to talk about the possibility of using the current consumption sectors of hydrogen, which is the industrial feedstock, oil refining, ammonia, methanol, iron and steel. Because we only talk, I mean, like most of the time we talk all about the use of hydrogen in power generation or in transportation, where those demand are not there yet. But why don't we start with this hydrogen use as feedstock in the industry? So this is an ongoing study or research that area is conducting. Then historically, ASEAN countries consume 3.2 million of tons of hydrogen from the oil refining, from the ammonia fertilizer sectors, which is the biggest in ASEAN, in contrary to the average world, and then also from methanol production and iron and steel. And by 2020, it increased to 3.6 million tons. And there are, the future can tell differently. I mean, like from our study, this is a preliminary result, so that please not take this as a definitive value. For example, when ASEAN country would like to go net zero, then the consumption of hydrogen might reach 11 million tons by 2050, while we consider only the current determined target based on the Paris Agreement, then it will stays at 7.3 million tons by 2050. But in between, there is kind of a most likely scenario that we are working on, and it might reach to 8 million tons of hydrogen consumption in this industry sector. The thing is that this sector are price-sensitive sectors where a slight change in the feedstock might reduce the competitiveness of the sector. So that it is quite sensitive to bring this issue to this industry sector. However, this is quite promising because it is there, and it is and this consumption will grow in any case. So this can be a kind of attracting factors for the industry to start to grow up. I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this excellent presentation. I think you've given us very different options for opportunities to use hydrogen in this context, the curtailment or reducing the curtailment role. And it was very interesting, this contracts you mentioned about the flexibility to co-produce power and hydrogen at the same time. So it would be interesting to learn about that further, maybe in the Q&A round. And of course, very important for the region is how to utilize benefits of producing hydrogen on main islands, mainlands, and then shipping them to smaller areas for energy access that can also create broader benefits. And we are definitely, and finally, interested very much on the hydrogen for industry modeling scenarios you're undertaking, because we are working very closely in the region on the topic of industry decarbonization, and definitely low carbon hydrogen has a role there. So I think it will be a very important study from area. Now moving on to the third speaker from IEFA, Shantanu Srivastava. So I'd like to invite you to give your remarks. I understand you don't have slides, so please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not realize I was on mute. So I'm saying thank you so much for having me for this very important discussion. I'll try to keep it within the 10-minute limit. So to start with, I work as an energy finance analyst with the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, IFA. IFA is a global non-profit energy finance think tank. We are headquartered in the US, but we have regional offices across the world. I'm part of the IFA India team. We have an overarching aim to accelerate the transition to a more diverse and profitable energy economy. And with that aim in mind, we undertake research on the policy, finance, and technology aspects of the energy markets. And in India, we've done a lot of research, right from energy sector transformation to the role of new technologies such as green hydrogen, battery storage onto the grid, and the role of gas in the energy transition, land conflict and circular economy issues, and energy transition financing, which is the area of focus for my here at IFA. To start with, if you look at the kind of energy transition efforts India has done over the last 10 to 15 years, India has been a front runner in terms of installing renewable energy onto the grid. We have upwards of close to 170 gigawatts of installed renewable energy, including large hydro, and we plan to go up to have a mix of 50% installed electricity capacity from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030. And if you just look at the kind of renewable energy capacity that would be required to achieve this target, we need somewhere around 230 to 240 gigawatts of incremental capacity of renewable energy that needs to be added over the next 7 to 8 years. So we have really ambitious goals when it comes to decarbonization of the power sector. But India also has the goal of energy independence by 2047, and we've set ourselves a target for net zero by 2070. And to achieve that, now the government is also thinking about decarbonization or energy transition of the economy as a whole, and that is where the government has put up a lot of faith in green hydrogen to decarbonize a lot of these hard-to-abate sectors. If you today look the kind of consumption of hydrogen that we have in the country, there's somewhere around 5 million metric tons of hydrogen that is consumed on an annual basis in India. Close to 99% of that is used in the refinery and the ammonia sector. Going forward, to make sure that we're able to also put in a lot of these green hydrogen capacities till 2030, India released a comprehensive green hydrogen mission in January of this year. Now, this green hydrogen mission has an overarching objective to make India a global hub for production, usage, and export of green hydrogen and its derivatives. The initial target of the green hydrogen mission is to have yearly production of 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen per year by 2030. with the potential to enhance it to 10 million tons, if export market is conducive. The overall aim of the government and also of the private sector, and I'll come to that in a bit of time, but overall aim is to bring the cost of green hydrogen in the country below the $1 per kg mark. And the green hydrogen mission is supposed to provide the policy levers to make sure that we reach that goal. If we just talk about the 5 million tons of target that India has, that would require, as per IFA analysis, somewhere around 170 to 118 gigawatts of incremental renewable energy capacity, which is not counted, in the 230 to 40 gigawatts of official renewable energy target that India has. So, there's a huge impetus for the growth of renewable energy in the country just because of India's green hydrogen target. In terms of industries, in terms of the decarbonization of industries, the mission aims to replace fossil fuel use with green hydrogen in several industries. For example, replacement of hydrogen produced from fossil fuel sources with green hydrogen in ammonia production, petroleum refining, blending green hydrogen, city gas distribution systems, which is a priority area for of development for the government in India. Production of steel with green hydrogen, use of green hydrogen derived synthetic fuels, for long haul transport, and decarbonization of other sectors through green hydrogen, right from mobility, shipping, and aviation. And now the way the government wants to grow this market is both a mix of export-led growth, where India again wants to become one of the major exporters of green hydrogen globally, and have a pie of somewhere around 10% till 2030 of global export, and also have domestic obligations and public procurement so that the domestic market for the fuel also grows. If you look at these, and this is what the central government is doing, and India has a state central kind of a structure, a federal structure. On a state level, there are several Indian states which are spearheading efforts from themselves to grow a local green hydrogen economy, within their jurisdictions. So, for example, Karnataka, one of the states which ranks high on GDP within the country, it has a plan to build India's first green hydrogen manufacturing cluster zone. And you have Odisha, which is the biggest producer of steel in the country, which again aims to decarbonize the steel sector within the state boundaries. It also has it's a coastal state, so it also wants to become a hub for export of green hydrogen from India to other parts of the world. You have Gujarat, which is one of the most prosperous states in the country, which also has ambitious green hydrogen goals. And then you have Kerala, a southern state, which has, it's earmarked somewhere around $500 million for development of green hydrogen hub in its capital city. So, state level, central level efforts, both are trying to grow the market of green hydrogen in the country. Now, if you look at the corporate efforts, corporates have actually been the front runners in terms of, corporate India has been a front runner in terms of making, understanding the potential of the green hydrogen and decarbonization of the economy as a whole. And, the biggest conglomerates in the country, right from the Reliance Industries to the Adani Group, they have pegged to, reach the $1 per kg green hydrogen production mark by 2030. They've pledged, enormous amounts of capital to be deployed into the development of this, fuel in the country. You have other plans from smaller other corporates also. So Jackson Group, for example, it plans to invest close to $3 billion in green ammonia production in Rajasthan state, which is the western state in the country. Greenco Group and Belgium's Johan Crockel Group, they plan to set up the world's biggest electrolyzer factory in India, which will have an initial capacity of 2 gigawatts. Atme Group has another ambitious plan, a multi-billion-dollar plan to set up green hydrogen ammonia project in Tamil Nadu, another state in the country. So corporate efforts are also, very much in line with what the state level and central level policy thrusts are in development of the green hydrogen sector. And if you see, the kind of financial outlay that has been provided as part of the green hydrogen mission. So initially, somewhere around $2.5 billion worth of capital has been allocated for the green hydrogen mission by the government, of which somewhere around $2.1 billion is going to go for production-linked incentive schemes in India, which is going to provide capital for development of green hydrogen electrolyzers and production of green hydrogen as a fuel in the country. And this is this $2.5 billion is expected to bring in somewhere around $100 billion of private capital into the green hydrogen economy by 2030 through the government efforts and policy side interventions. Now, if you see, and let me come to the financial aspects, and that's where the majority of the work at IFA is focused on. So if you see the global, very crudely, the global spread of financial wealth, less than 20% of that is with the global south, right, which India is a part of. And majority of the capital that is required to be invested of this 100 billion that I'm talking about, it has to come from private sources, right? So in essence, private capital from developed parts of the world is very important to be deployed into Indian low carbon technologies, specifically for these hard to abate sectors. And I think, and we at IFA believe that global sustainable finance markets / ESG markets are a very appropriate marketplace for tapping into and providing for the capital needs for decarbonization of the economy for developing countries like India. So just this last year, just talking about debt issuances in the sustainable finance markets, it topped $1.5 trillion. In India, they were just about $8.5 billion. So you can imagine the kind of potential India has to tap into this growing market for sustainable finance. And if you see the kind of instruments that have been developed in the sustainable finance markets, specific instruments such as sustainability-linked bonds, loans, and transition bonds have been developed, which cater to the needs, capital needs of development of low-carbon technologies in hard-to-abate sectors. While there have been some issuances in India of these instruments, but majority of the issuances have been the global north. So very important to make sure the 100 actually flows into economies, and that's what IFA believes, that there needs to be a conducive transition / sustainable finance ecosystem that needs to be developed, that has several facets, and work on all of these facets needs to be happening on in tandem. So we believe first thing obviously is policy and reform, and that is going to the bedrock on which capital is then going to come into emerging economies like India. And if you see what India has done right from the green hydrogen mission to also, India also announced a green hydrogen policy in the past, where it has provided several incentives and policy reforms to de-risk investments for green hydrogen in the country. You make these investments more bankable and help crowd in private capital. So right from providing a long-term roadmap of what is the kind of investment the country wants to do, what is the kind of targets that they have, to providing policy-side reforms such as waiver of access to transmission system, ability to procure renewable energy from any part of the country, allocating land in renewable energy parks, which is a very solid model of on the basis of which renewable energy has actually grown in the country. Also, providing single portal for statutory clearance for all facets of green hydrogen business in the country, providing grid scale auctions for green hydrogen specifically by aggregating demand for different ministries, different industries. So all of these policy levers will be required, but these are just one part of the overall ecosystem, right? And very important, but only just one part. We also believe there is an importance to make sure there is proper definitions of what is green / transitionary / brown. So either through a green taxonomy or through a principles-based approach, we understand what is a proper definition for a transitionary asset. There is verifiability in terms of guidelines. How do you verify whether an asset is transitionary or not? And thirdly, there has to be interoperability and harmonization of all of these definitions with what are these definitions in other taxonomies, such as, let's say, the EU taxonomy. So taxonomy development is very important. Secondly, we believe disclosure regimes are very important, and that's where the government is also planning to roll out the mandatory disclosure regime, BRSR, in the country. So that's very important to make sure that you have a conducive environment. And thirdly, very important is the development of a conducive carbon taxation regime coupled with a compliance carbon trading market. So, and obviously along with that, there are several other things, but due to the lack of time, I would say these are the 3 or 4 most important things to develop within the country to make sure that you are able to tap into the sustainable finance markets and provide capital for the development of low carbon technologies in the country. So I would like to stop over there. and
thank you.
happy to answer some questions.
Thank you. This was impressive summary of the hydrogen mission in India. Can I summarize all your inputs with conclusion that the start of a successful policy framework is to have a very comprehensive national hydrogen strategy, including supply, demand, business models, financing, detailed policies, with roles for both the government and the private sector, but also finance institutions, and finally detailing all of these step by step with quantitative measures and targets, perhaps on costs, on deployment, etc. So this was very helpful, and I think this type of good practices, learnings from India, I think will be very helpful also for the other countries in the South and Southeast Asia region. To move on with the fourth and the last presentation, that is from our colleague Hiroki Yoshida from the METI, Japan, who will be sharing with us some experiences from the country, with also focus on very interesting developments on the power sector and hydrogen interplay.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful webinar holding by OECD. My name is Hiroki Yoshida from Hydrogen Fuel Cell Strategy Office of METI Japan. I'm going to make a brief presentation on Japan vision and action toward hydrogen economy. Japan is the first country to formulate a national hydrogen strategy in 2017. Prime Minister set 2050 carbon neutral declaration, and Japan positioned hydrogen as one of the priority areas in the green growth strategy in 2020. In addition, Japan is trying to expand the amount of hydrogen introduction and to achieve cost reduction through the government support, including Green Innovation Fund projects and investment toward green transformation, GX. Our target is shown bottom of this slide, focusing on volume and cost. Regarding volume, currently approximately 2 million ton hydrogen. Target is 3 million ton by 2030, 20 million ton by 2050. Regarding the cost, currently 100 Japanese yen per normal cubic meter. Target is 30 Japanese yen per normal cubic meter by 2030, 20 Japanese yen per normal cubic meter by 2050. The Strategic Energy Plan revised in 2021 shows updated power generation mix target toward 2030. It requires improvement of more energy efficiency and more deployment of renewable energy. In addition, it allocates 1% for hydrogen and ammonia in 2030 power generation mix. This table shows rough roadmap for supply side and demand side. Regarding supply side, we are now developing international hydrogen supply chain and new domestic supply sources. So far, these are demonstration phase, but we are trying to make them as a commercial basis by 2030 and upscaling and diversification until 2050. Regarding to demand side, transportation sector continue to roll over leading hydrogen demand. We are now seeking to promote introduction of fuel cell trucks for more volume of demand in transportation sector. We expect power generation sector will make large-scale demand, and it will contribute to hydrogen supply chain development, same to LNG. Hydrogen also has the potential to decarbonize steel and chemical production processes and heat demand. So we are doing demonstration projects in this field as well. We are conducting large-scale electrolyzer demonstration project in Fukushima Prefecture and Yamanashi Prefecture. Alkaline electrolyzer plant in Fukushima Prefecture, PEM electrolyzer plants in Yamanashi Prefecture. Currently, larger demonstration projects are underway for Mr. Shikoheki-san, MCH, LHC, as a hydrogen carrier in the demonstration project was completed in June 2020 between Brunei and Japan. Liquefied hydrogen carrier completed the world first maritime transportation between Australia to Japan in February 2022, including loading and unloading of liquefied hydrogen, followed by a large-scale demonstration project aimed at commercialization by 2029. Japan does not have sufficient renewable energy potential, and Japan is an island country. Japan is developing maritime transportation technology for hydrogen. We believe these technology can unlock and enable potential of countries with abundant renewable energy potential, including Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America for international hydrogen trade. Currently, this is a snapshot of demand side. Currently, approximately 7,600 FCBs and 180 hydrogen refueling station HRS are developed as of November 2022. Fukushima Prefecture and Toyota are preparing to start fuel cell truck demonstration project, including refueling timing management. We are also starting to develop high-speed refueling protocol for heavy-duty vehicles. In addition, hydrogen refueling station is trying not only to expand refueling volume to vehicles, but also to provide hydrogen to multiple uses. Moreover, hydrogen and ammonia are expected to be used in ships and airplanes in the future. Japan has been a world leader in hydrogen power generation technology. Demonstration projects are underway for both large and small turbines. We understand that power generation contributes to the balancing of renewable energy fluctuations. It means power generation is still important even as the increasing of renewable energy sources. Japan will contribute to the world effort to commercialization of hydrogen power generation. Hydrogen boiler has already had deployment cases. Hydrogen is expected to be used as a high heat sources at a high temperature required in industry process. Projects using hydrogen as a heat sources are underway in diverse fields, including auto parts manufacturing, tire manufacturing, and coffee roasting. In order to create a hydrogen implementation model, we are encouraging region private companies, relevant bodies which have potential of hydrogen activities to start discussion and doing feasibility study, doing R&D demonstration project, and or actual implementation. Kind of regional model or hydrogen cluster are called Hydrogen Hub and Hydrogen Valley. This is a snapshot of Fukushima Prefecture. Fukushima Prefecture, located in north part of Japan, is one of the active prefecture for hydrogen. As you know, NEDO is handling the demonstration project for large-scale electrolysis with renewable energy at the Fukushima Hydrogen Energy Research Field, FH2R. Fukushima Prefecture and Namiya Town are using hydrogen and fuel cell for their public facilities with hydrogen. This hydrogen comes from FH2R. Fukushima Renewable Energy Institute, ISTO, FREA, conduct R&D and D related to hydrogen and support to technological development of companies and universities. Sumitomo Rubber Industry, tire manufacturer, has started demonstration project for development of hydrogen boiler at their factory line. Denso, car parts manufacturer, has started demonstration project for using electric heaters and hydrogen burners in their production line. Iwatani and Soma Gas Group, gas provider, has started to feasibility study for blending hydrogen into their gas services. We are doing many demonstration and R&D project, but we should effort to actual use for hydrogen. METI established a new subcommittee for hydrogen policy in March 2022. The subcommittee has had intensive discussion on support scheme for narrowing the price gap between clean hydrogen and counterfactual fuels for set period and on support scheme for developing infrastructure. This slide shows support scheme for narrowing the price gap, like a contract for difference CFD for 15 years of interim report of subcommittee. Support will be based on the price gap. It means strike price and reference price per project. Regarding the S+3 principles, safety, energy security, economic efficiency, environment, evaluate the supplier's project from strategic perspectives. The subcommittee continued to develop details in this year. Japan launched the Hydrogen Energy Ministerial Meeting, HEMM, in 2018. We believe the Hydrogen Energy Ministerial Meeting is one of the most ideal meetings for hydrogen-related ministers and top executives to express and discuss direction to build the hydrogen society and future initiatives. METI and NEDO held the 5th Hydrogen Energy Ministerial Meeting in cooperation with IEA as a part of Tokyo GX Week on September 2022. As a result of a meeting, the chair released the chair's summary for accelerating and enlargement of the Tokyo Statement and the Global Action Agenda, including additional goal on the amount of renewable and low carbon hydrogen to be produced by 2030 of at least 90 million tons. International cooperation is important to realize hydrogen economy globally. Japan is engaging in the wide range of international multilateral cooperations, including Hydrogen Energy Ministerial Meeting, IPHE, CEN, Clean Energy Ministerial Meeting, Hydrogen Initiative, G7, G20, COP, Breakthrough Agenda, also including OECD, etc. In order to realize the international hydrogen trade, we are now facing the importance of developing international standard certification, including green gas calculation methodology for hydrogen production and mutual recognition mechanism for carbon intensity-based hydrogen trade. IPHE has developed a working document for the methodology, and the ISO Technical Committee 197 is starting the development of international standard based on the IPHE document. International cooperation is very crucial to accelerate and realize hydrogen economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very interesting insights. Actually, you also provided some specific emerging schemes that can be applied in creating a cost-competitive hydrogen market development, such as the carbon contracts for difference. And I would like to follow up with a number of questions, in particular for the case of the Philippines. And then there's also one question I have to my colleague from Japan about the role of international cooperation. But going back to the case of the Philippines, it's very interesting to see this new roadmap, this new strategy being framed in the country for hydrogen. And Patrick, you've given very briefly an example on a potential policy business model on this 100% ownership example. But if you could give some further insights on the policies that you have in mind or you're considering in the preparation of the development of this strategy, that would be very helpful, I think, for also other countries to learn.
Yeah, thank you for that. What we are actually doing at this point in time is that the conversation around hydrogen and even ammonia arose. I think Mr. Joko had a presentation on the potential for the offshore wind. We are seeing, based on the most recent study that we were able to secure, that our offshore wind potential really exceeds if we are able to harness most of it, it will exceed our own demands. So part of the conversations that we are having is making sure that any excess gets stored. And among the technologies that we've seen, apart from battery, we've seen that hydrogen offers the best potential. And to provide for the framework for that, the reforms that we have initiated is with respect to the removal of the nationality requirements on certain renewable energy sources. And I did mention already solar, wind, biomass, and we are dovetailing that with our direction for hydrogen. But note that we will be coming out with specific roadmap for hydrogen and ammonia. And similar to what our other peers, the earlier presenters have been looking at, we would want to be able to integrate hydrogen as a source or a fuel that will help us achieve our clean energy scenario, or what our peers here refer to as the net zero objectives. Internally, the regulations, at least in so far as the energy storage is concerned, we are in the process of updating that to include hydrogen as part of it. For our own roadmap, I'm taking notes of the examples, let's say, coming from Japan and then our colleagues from India. Those are also the same things that we are eyeing to support our hydrogen. But the direction at this point in time, to be clear, we're looking at it domestical, the hydrogen production for domestic use. But as we lay down our own hydrogen roadmap, we will also align with what we are seeing with our ASEAN and regional peers. We'll also be willing to be part of that value chain that's emerging with respect to hydrogen. Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for these remarks. And I hope in the next webinars we can hear more updates and inputs from the Philippine side, because it's actually quite a unique angle you're taking in the development of your strategy, as I understand. So very interesting. There was one question from Indonesia, Pak Herman, to your question. It's a very important one on the cost competitiveness of fuel cell cars and other types of transport vehicles. But going back to my colleague, I had one question about the role of the international cooperation, because you nicely mentioned it at the end, but also at the beginning of your presentation, the size of the hydrogen market Japan is aiming to develop, whereas imports will be an important supplier to supply that future demand. So it would be very interesting you see in creating this market. If you could elaborate on that a little bit, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, we understand we have many challenges for accelerating and ramping up hydrogen market handling for using, because frequently we facing leakage problem something. So basically we should develop more technical development for more naturally using hydrogen and focusing the cost reduction. So every country have many experience. So if we can share lesson learned for some foreign country more efficiently entered using hydrogen and try to challenge to using hydrogen. And so far, of course, in Japan, we don't have natural resource, and also we don't have sufficient renewable energy potential. So we should import other countries. So, and other country potentially could be a net exporter for hydrogen. So, but we, of course, we should transportation technology, but also we should especially we focus in net zero and carbon neutral society. So we should taking care of hydrogen production for associated hydrogen GHG gas emission associated with hydrogen production because we should use for clean hydrogen. So, but currently, lack of internationally agreed standard for calculation methodology, and we don't have mutual recognition mechanism between country and country. So, if we develop such kind of international standard and mutual recognition mechanism, we can accelerate and unlock to international hydrogen trade. So this timing now is very, we are saying both to unlocking the international trade. I believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for these insights. And on the last point you mentioned, we fully agree on the need for mechanisms, new standards that are needed to facilitate trade. And actually, at the end of January, so 2 months ago, we have had the first webinar of this series that was paying attention to the role of certification mechanisms. So the interested audience could always look up our webpage, the CEFM webpage at OECD, and you will find the summary presentations there. We try to answer that question with the latest developments. But again, thank you for making this remark, because it's definitely part of a large policy framework in the context of utilizing hydrogen's role for decarbonization and power system transformation. So if Joseph allows, I would like to conclude and make the wrap up of this very full meeting with many points from many different countries. But I want to thank, first of all, Joseph for organizing this webinar, and my colleague Joanna, and as well as Dominique for taking care of all the technical issues. The common, I think, understanding for me was there is a two-way benefit between low carbon hydrogen, particularly the one that is produced from renewable power, and the production of hydrogen for power system transformation. It benefits both sides if the planning is done in advance and in detail where the opportunities exist in different country contexts. Today we've heard from Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, India, Australia, and Japan on the very different characteristics and needs of individual countries. And that was the purpose of this regional peer learning event. And that requires really country-specific solutions, as was also highlighted during the keynote speech from the IEA, which has specifically mentioned within this region, there is a big potential, first of all, also for trade that can also benefit the power sector decarbonization, because hydrogen is actually in different forms provides multiple solutions for integration of intermittent or variable renewable energy carriers, but also to as potentially as a fuel also for decarbonize existing fossil fuel power assets. But there was I think, an important highlight, which was made by several speakers, and that came also in the poll 1 as a challenge. There is a big infrastructure need. It's actually quite large, as was mentioned. Now, in the region, there is obviously a very significant renewable energy potential. I think we've seen the theoretical potentials that are by far too much to produce or to meet the local demand, so that can be used for many other purposes like hydrogen production. And the example from the Philippines we've heard today on the offshore wind highlights that for a specific country. And the different presentations and interventions have shown that there's actually quite a number of interesting projects that are being undertaken. Some of them were new to us, and I'm sure to you as well. So that shows that the dynamics in the region are quite rapidly evolving, because typically, especially in the Southeast Asia, compared to other regions, hydrogen discussion has just started. But it's showing that actually there's a lot happening, and not only with solar and wind, but also with hydropower, with geothermal, given the abundance of other renewable energy carriers in the region. It was highlighted by a number of speakers, the need for holistic policies, so hydrogen as part of a broader energy and climate strategy, but also the strategies of hydrogen detailed and explained in a very comprehensive way. And that was, I think, the example given from the benefits for both power sector and hydrogen sectors, but the benefits sort of technical are obviously not limited to those. As was mentioned, national strategies need to encompass what's needed at the state level, at the provincial level, at rural levels, because also for energy access, for creating local value chains that are beneficial for social and economic development, especially in the emerging and developing economies, will be very important. And we need to understand what that also implies with respect to infrastructure needs and land availability issues. Maybe a few final points. I think we've heard about the role of hydrogen for cutting curtailment, for smoothing power supply, providing firm capacity, energy access benefits. So there's a wide range of options. We need to yet understand what this implies in terms of mobilizing public and private investment. And we've heard from let's say a more advanced market in Japan, the type of strategies on mobilizing such investments in a country, and what type of different business models, market-based instruments such as contract for differences can play a role. So as other markets in the region also develop, these will also need to be replicated depending on the needs of the countries. So I think, and I hope I was able to cover everything that was discussed today. But please don't worry, because everything is recorded. This video of the presentations and everything will be available online at the OECD CEFIM webpage, along with a short summary of what we've discussed today. And should you have any questions still about the presentations or about our program, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Here's our emails. My colleague Joseph and myself, we will be very happy to take this discussion further. And finally, the third in this series of these webinars is planned to take place sometime in May, early June. And there will be more on the hydrogen for industrial uses, the specific needs on financing. So on all these different priority topics we will be discussing. Thank you so much to all speakers and all the audience. See you next time.
Thank you, and see you, Degar and Joseph.